Thank you. So, this weekend, it'll be exactly 2 years to the date since I was forced to flee Sri Lanka and settle in the United States. 2 years ago, in October 2012, on the 25th of October, we left in the dead of night, actually, Colombo. I left with my two sons, my elder son and my younger son. My elder son was 20 at the time, my younger was just 6. And we arrived in Seattle, shivering and uncertain of what our future held, but there was no turning back. It was just a case of moving forward. To start with, I'm going to first, since I have been asked many times in America where Sri Lanka is, I figured I should start off by telling you it's an island nation in the Indian Ocean. It is not a part of India, it's a separate country. Very beautiful, known for its rich historical heritage, 2,600-year-old cultural heritage, beautiful beaches, fabulous wildlife, and that's the tourist blurb on Sri Lanka. I mean, it is indeed a beautiful country, but the reality of what actually happens in that country stops with its geographical beauty. It has been rated by the Committee to Protect Journalists as the 4th most dangerous country for journalists to practice their profession in. Under the current regime, led by President Mahinda Rajapaksha, 9 journalists have been murdered. None of the perpetrators have been brought to justice or found. Among those 9 journalists was Lasantha Wickrematunge, my predecessor, editor-in-chief and founder editor of the Sunday Leader. Lasantha was ambushed and killed on his way to work in January 2009. It followed years of intimidation, persecution, and harassment. The paper, the Sunday Leader, was founded in 1994. Lasantha was beaten up. His house has been shot at. He and I both have been manhandled, dragged in and out of courts over a period of years, all politically motivated cases. As the newspaper continued, we built up a reputation not only locally but internationally for our investigative journalism. But the paper paid a huge price. We were attacked 9 times. Our presses were burnt twice. And ultimately, we paid the newspaper paid the ultimate price when Lasantha was murdered in January 2009. Together with Lasantha, I have had to watch many other of my colleagues beaten up or killed. Over here in the center is Keith Noyer, another associate editor of another newspaper, but a journalistic colleague, who was brutally beaten up by a government goon squad. Keith has also relocated to a foreign country since with his young family. This is the day I stood by helplessly and watched Lasantha die together with some family members and almost the entire staff of the Sunday Leader. I took over from Lasantha on March 1st, 2009. It certainly wasn't easy stepping into the shoes of a dead man or a man who had been murdered. Soon after I took over, I received a death threat. It was written in red ink, and it came in the vernacular in Sinhalese. It said, "Bitch, we will chop you up if you don't stop writing." Lasantha received a similar death threat in the same red ink 3 weeks before he was murdered. But, as I said, we believed in what we were doing. We believed that we were making a difference in Sri Lanka and that we were changing the way people thought by exposing official corruption. This man is Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Defense Secretary in Sri Lanka. He is still Defense Secretary, and he's the younger brother of President Mahinda Rajapaksha. Lasantha, in fact, published a series of articles about corruption involving Gotabaya Rajapaksa, so much so that Rajapaksa went to court and actually got a court order which banned the newspaper from naming him in any future articles. This happened a couple of months before Lasantha was murdered. After I took over, I suddenly had a run-in with this man. So in July 2012, I telephoned him for a comment. It was involving a story that he was trying to fly a puppy dog down from Switzerland for his wife. And in doing so, they were actually changing planes. The Sri Lankan Airlines International, 2 flights, they were going to change it from a wider-bodied A340 to a small A330 or something like that, to accommodate a pilot friend who would fly the smaller-bodied plane to Switzerland and bring down this puppy dog for Rajapaksa's wife. And as a result, 59 passengers were going to be offloaded. And I just called him for a comment. He just went berserk, and he screamed at me repeatedly, "You are a fucking pig who eats shit." I apologize for the language, but this is what he... And as I remember holding my phone in my hand, absolutely shocked. And I kept telling him, I said, Mr. Rajapaksa, I wish you can hear yourself. And then he told me, he said, if you and I were at the same function together, and I were to point you out as the editor of the Sunday Leader, 90% of the people there would want to see you dead. So, of course, I ran the story, and I published the entire conversation. And it made... Well... He went a step further, because the following week, he was, of course, interviewed by all the newspapers in the country, including international news agencies. And he said, what's the big deal? When he was asked whether he had used such language on me, he said, what's the big deal? Because, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, so the man, ironically, is an American citizen. And he said, this is the way Americans speak. I have lived 2 years in the US now, and I can vouch for the fact that Americans do not speak the way Mr. Rajapaksa speaks and behaves. Anyway, the government moved fast. I mean, they don't take mud being thrown in their face lightly. And the public shame and ridicule he faced as a fallout of that story, they convinced a close ally to buy out the newspaper on the condition that I would be sacked with immediate effect. And that is exactly what happened. Within a week of the takeover, which happened 2 months later, I was sacked. But it didn't stop there. The newspaper then published an apology to Mr. Rajapaksa for that story. And I started being followed. It's not the first time I have been followed, but nevertheless, followed home by unidentified men on motorbikes. I got a threatening phone call where this man just screamed at me, basically saying, why did I take Gotabaya Rajapaksa on, that he's a war hero, etc., etc. And I was then told by my lawyers, he brought a fresh lawsuit against me. I was told by my lawyers that my passport was going to be impounded and that I was definitely going to go to jail. And so I figured it was time that I stopped playing heroin and be a mom. I had 2 sons. In 2009, I'm going back here a little bit. In 2009, I had broken another story involving the army commander and Mr. Rajapaksa. The army chief accused him of having committed a serious war crimes. We ran the story. There was a huge controversy. And again, I received numerous death threats. But in the midst of all this, I got a phone call from the US ambassador. She had just taken over. She was new to the country. And she invited me for tea at her official residence. It wasn't unusual for editors to meet with ambassadors on a one-to-one basis like that. And I went to her residence. I was astounded that over a cup of tea, she told me that she believed my life was seriously under threat. And she asked me to bring my passport and the passport of my 2 children to the US Embassy, and she stamped our passports with multiple entry visas to the US that were valid until 2015. At the time, I told a couple of close confidants I would never use those visas. I was proud to be Sri Lankan. I was determined to hold on to my Sri Lankan passport, and I was determined never to leave. But in 2012, when I had this run-in with Gotabaya Rajapaksa, she actually was one of the first people to call me. I still remember that phone call that Sunday that the story broke. And her exact words to me were, she said, babe, this time you've gone too far. And she said, you have those visas, and we're just a phone call away. I was still determined that I wasn't going to leave. But as I said, once I was removed, I was definitely I was facing a jail term, and there appeared to be no option. So we left, like I said, in the dead of night. We were afraid that I would be stopped by Sri Lankan immigration. We arrived in Seattle. I arrived in Seattle with a very angry 20-year-old who didn't want to leave his country. That has been the fallout of relocating, apart from us having lost everything. The home that we loved, people that we knew, my family has been split into three, and it has certainly not been easy starting all over again. It's been a case of starting from scratch. I have had to reinvent myself in America. I went back to school, and in the last 1.5 years I've been in school, and I'm studying for my bachelor's in fine arts and interior design. And 3 months ago, I got hired as an interior designer full-time by a leading furnishing house in Seattle. I must say I enjoy my job. But but the situation in Sri Lanka continues. This picture shows, this is another well-known journalist. He's a former editor, Jayasiri Jayasekara, who just this month was very seriously threatened with death in Sri Lanka. His whole family, in fact, have been threatened with death. And here you see pictures of human rights activists, again, condemning the threatening of a lawyer, these two lawyers, Mahinda Rajapaksha and Manjula Patiraja, also this month. So the situation just gets worse. It's a tyrannical regime, a dictatorship where they function with impunity, and there is little or no accountability. As for me, like I said, it's about starting all over. I know that there are many Sri Lankans who have told me, you're lucky you got out, you're privileged to be in America, to have had the opportunity to go to the US and start life afresh. I am lucky. I'm lucky to be alive. I know that, and I am grateful. I am grateful. America has been good to us. But that said, I mean, I know that there are some of you out there in the audience who have also had to relocate, flee your countries, leave everything behind, like I had to. And I know that you will understand when I say that the reality is a nightmare. It's a living hell. Thank you.